Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Reese and I talk about what I'm reading and sometimes I talk about what I'm writing. Today I'm sharing a review of one of my favorite books that I read this year, Beautyland by Marie-Helene Bertino. This is the story of a woman who is actually an alien who is born here on Earth and reports back to her alien superiors what she sees here, what life is like here. It follows from her birth through growing up to getting a job, finding a life's purpose, and all the while she is sending communications back to her homeworld via a fax machine. The author describes this book as a work of speculative fiction, but I would throw all of your preconceived notions about genre aside for this one. It was named by the New York Times as one of their 100 most notable books of 2024. Time magazine had this in their list of the top 10 books of fiction in 2024. I'm sure it's been on many other lists that I don't remember off the top of my head. On the list of my favorite books that I read this year, I'll go ahead and say it's definitely the best book that I read this year. I enjoyed it so much and I just want more people to read it, so I am going to talk about it with you on this video. I'll start with my first impressions of the book even before I read it, because I remember seeing it on the shelves of my local bookstore and it was, you know, faced out. It probably had a little blurb. And yeah, the cover caught my eye. It was a little different. It's pretty minimal compared to some of the other book covers out there. It's purple. I don't really follow a lot of trends of book covers, or at least I didn't this year. But I felt like it was a little unique. The title also caught my eye. I think I was subconsciously avoiding looking at it because it had the word beauty in it, and I used to work in the beauty industry and I was probably a little like, oh no, I don't want to read a story about that or whatever. But yeah, actually the title is a reference to a shop that is in the neighborhood that our main character grows up in. But also, I'm gonna guess it's a metaphor for Earth based on the story now that I've read it, and also the cover, which has, you know, pointing to one of these little bright dots in the sky. So like I said with the genre, like, kind of throw the title out of your mind. If you're like, oh, beauty, why would I? No, just read it, trust me, okay. What eventually did get me to read it was kind of a recommendation of sorts. There is a YouTuber that I follow who owns a bookshop. Her name is CJ from CJ Reads, and she owns Sunny's bookstore in Yuma, Arizona. This was a book club pick for her book club, and I didn't read it with the group, but I remember seeing it after the fact and thinking, okay, well, if she picked this for a book club, then it's probably a banger. I generally have liked all of the recommendations, things I've seen that she said she liked, so that was my entry into this book, and I'm so glad that I did, because now I am a Bertino super fan. Can I say that? Is that weird? I don't want to embarrass myself, but yeah. Anyways, I've read another book by her and I loved it, so yes, I can say she is one of my favorite writers at this point in time. A little bit more about the book and my experience reading it. This story follows, like I said, our alien woman main character. Her name is Adina. As she grows up and lives her life, she is a Italian-American, lives and grew up in northern Philadelphia with her mother, single mother, and eventually she moves to New York, spends some time there. So that's kind of the setting of this story. This book talks about alienation, family, single motherhood, chosen family, sadness, grief, and finding a sense of purpose. I found the way the author shows us the relationships that Adina has with the various people in her life to be really honest, and there's this beautiful balance of showing us through what's happening in the story, and then also these internal reflections that Adina has, the things she sends via fax. And yeah, it was such a well-balanced way of looking at action and internal thought. Bertino also splits the book into 3 or 4 sections which reference the life cycle of a star, and then within each section there's not chapters, but it's more like little vignettes, which I really felt was effective, especially when there are some parts that are this more observational style. There were a lot of amazing pop culture references in this book, everything from E.T. to Carl Sagan to Moonstruck, the movie, to your favorite workout instructor who basically becomes one of your closest friends because you see them on a weekly or daily basis more than you see your actual close friends. But then there are also these beautiful truths that are peppered throughout this story within her observations, like this one that I'll read. When you're little, she faxes, sadness is a kid you can kick out of your game. A simple fast food feeling that leaves as soon as the bully is gone. Deeper sadness gets buried into one's coastal shelf, accessible only by your adult version. And what a poetic way of saying, yeah, you can ignore your sadness as a kid, but it gets buried down in there. And I mean, maybe I've been going to therapy a lot, but that was really impactful for me. And that brings me to another topic I want to talk about this book, which is the writing. I felt so compelled to keep reading this story. Every sentence made me want to keep on reading. And not because I was so like, oh, I need to know what's going to happen, a page turner. No, it was really just such a beautiful puzzle piece of dialogue and narrative and those observations that you just wanted to keep going. And I was reminded of the wonderful advice from George Saunders in his book, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, which is that every sentence that you write's job is to keep the reader reading, to get them to the next sentence. And that was exactly my experience reading this book. I was reading some interviews with Bertino to learn more about her writing process, and there was a question which kind of led her into the topic of, you know, writing to attract readers. And she said, quote, "I have never been led by or engaged with that idea, I think because of the nature of my work. That said, one of the questions I was thinking about when I was writing Beautyland was, if you triple down on the song that only you can sing, if you get as specific as you can get, could it be more universal?" And that stuck with me because this book is so specific, but it is also so incredibly universal. And that made me think that specificity in writing is the way to draw your reader in, because that allows the reader to imagine themselves in that moment, even if they have never been in that moment, even if they are not an Italian-American girl from Philly, even if they are not an alien placed on this planet to report back about life on Earth. You could argue whether or not Adina is actually an alien or if she's just a delusional character, but I think that's not really the point. For the record, though, I will say I believe in Adina. If you are a reader looking for an amazing, funny, honest, sad, but beautiful story, you should read this book. If you are a writer who wants to read something that is sharp and tightly written and compelling, you should read this book. I would also recommend this book to the following people. Anyone who has ever felt weird, alone, or different, which honestly is all of us. Okay. Anyone who has ever experienced loss in their life. Anyone who loves the movie E.T., loves the show Pen 15 and or loves Carl Sagan should read this book. Anyone who struggles with the vulnerability that comes from putting your writing or your art out into the world should definitely read this book. I don't want to spoil too much about what happens later on in the book, but that becomes a major part of Adina's story. And then, of course, if you have ever walked the streets of New York City listening to Philip Glass on your headphones, you should definitely read this book. Beautyland, a 5-star read for me, the best book that I read in 2024, the perfect story of feeling different, feeling like there is something bigger out there that's meant for you, feeling powerless in the face of all of that, but still finding the beauty in life. If you've read this book and you think of another book that's similar, please let me know. I would love to read more like this story. And if you haven't read this book and you pick it up, I truly hope you enjoy. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.